So I've got with me Liam Anderson. Liam is head of sports science and medicine at Crewe Alexandra. I remember Liam well from his time, from the battles we had when I was at Exeter and Liam was still at Crewe. And I remember that game. Do you remember when it was raining and they tried to call it off?
Right. Bouncing the balls before the game.
Yeah, I think the referee had let the air out so that it wouldn't.
It just dropped, but I think it might have been a Tuesday night, and we'd come on the Monday all the way down from Crewe, and we weren't not playing that game, mate.
No, I can remember your manager saying, "We're just going to play it," and then our manager said, "We might as well." And it was one of I was in the tunnel, and it was at that goal, and it was one of the most comical things I've ever seen. The two manager wanting to play it, and the referee not knowing what to do. But fair play to you guys, because I don't know whether it was a draw or we won, but I do remember saying fair play to Crewe because they want it on, and Exeter's not the most. It's not the easiest place to get to.
No. No, not at all.
But anyway, Liam, tell us a little bit about your role at Crewe.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I'm the head of sports science and medicine. I oversee the sports science side of things, and also like liaise with the medical staff daily. I sort of try and look after the players' fitness levels and to aim their optimum performance on match day, and also look at different injury rates as well and try to reduce them accordingly throughout the season. Obviously a little bit different to a role which comes at a Premier League club, because you're usually also the man in the meetings and the man on the ground as well. It's a lot to take on, and it's sort of trying to link in all that together and feed everything back to the manager as you possibly can, really. Yeah,
that's very similar to what I do here. And I think that feeding back is essential. It's a process that I think it has to be worked on, actually, because there's multiple plates being spun at the same time with medical and the players' needs and the coaching staff's needs. It can be an interesting but varied day. You actually did your PhD at Liverpool.
Yeah. And some time ago now. It feels like a lifetime ago anyway, I think.
And what was your doctoral studies on?
So my PhD was titled Energy Intake, Expenditure and Training Load in English Premier League Soccer Players. We looked at how we can how we can optimise the nutritional practices to match the training load practices of players, and then also a little bit around the starters, non-starters side of things as well, and how that sort of differences in loading across different mesocycles and also across the season as well.
Yeah, and that's something that we were going to talk about today, is that question that comes up a lot is, the unused subs, those that are not playing, as a practitioner, and the same as yourself, that's a really difficult group. Not from a personal perspective, from a match demands perspective.
Yeah.
And I know you wrote an article recently for the FMPA about some of the things you've discovered. So I guess I'll let you take the lead on this and explain to us sort of what you found and where you're going with it.
Yeah, so it's not really what I've found, it's more so what I've sort of looked into and how we can try to optimise the response that non-starters get, because like you mentioned, it is one of the most difficult groups there, probably from a psychological point straight after a game. And then also from a physiological point, because you don't actually have a great deal of time to do any work with them. Now, I've really identified 3 key areas that we can try to improve on in order to optimise the development of these fitness levels of them players. And it's post-match conditioning, resistance training, and match day +1 training. Now, I think they all need to be taken into account. They're the 3 key things. There is other areas as well, such as under 23 fixtures and squad rotation and things like that, which we can work on. However, I think on the day, and we look at acutely what can we do in order to optimise the performance of them. So those 3 things, and that's in order to make up really the load that they've not been able to undertake from match play, because I think some of my research from my PhD came out that the highest load in the week is usually on match day. So it's about looking at where that load is. If they're missing out on that load, how can we try to recreate that load or train some energy systems in order to try to, improve or maintain fitness levels, like the players who have started the fixture and played, 90 minutes of football probably have. Now, I think the biggest thing that's come from all this is to actually question, is the loading that the starting players actually correct? Is that right? Because we don't actually know. We're assuming it's right because that's what they're playing for. But we're also trying to, maximize the development of them, which I've tried to go away now from looking at different numbers. Say, for example, in post-match running, I don't want to look at different numbers. I just want to say, okay, how can I train the aerobic energy system? How can I train the lactic acid energy system? How can I look at that, and how can I do different variations of runs in order to train them? So instead of aiming for 1,000 meters high speed running, it's more so, okay, you're working at this percentage and you're working for this time. And the subsequent effects from that is so be it. Because the actual energy system is probably more important than the numbers you hit on a GPS unit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think we also look at resistance training sessions. We need probably one resistance training session a week in order to maintain physical performance. And then the studies which have looked at players who have started or non-started and performance throughout a season have found that it's usually power indices that have reduced throughout a competitive season. That was a study, I think, done on Spanish or Portuguese players, and then one on Premier League players as well. So it gives us an indication that we are going to have to sort of try to replicate those resistance training demands through resistance training or some sort of eccentric loading. And I think some tools recently that have came out in the past 10 years, such as the K-Box, brilliant tool to take on away trips or home trips where you can get the entire squad through some eccentric loading, and also help with some injury prevention through increasing things like fascicle length of the muscle. So I think there's a multitude of different things we can use, but it's just about picturing every bit part of the puzzle, and what works for one team won't work for the next. That probably comes into the next section with match day plus one sessions, and I've seen, and we were just speaking about it before we came live, and I think a researcher called Sam Hills, who's out at Leeds Beckett University, did a good paper where he interviewed practitioners, and he found that 96% of practitioners did post-match runs. Now, that leaves either 4% to do nothing at all, or those over 4% are doing conditioning the day after a game, or they're in the day after a game. Now, if it is those four, I can probably pick who it is, and I think it's a new breed of managers that are now coming in that have this work ethic, and they have to be in all the time, and they are in the training ground all the time. But the non-starters players, the players who don't deem not to have enough minutes the day before, can probably come into the training ground and actually do some sort of work and try and replicate those game demands, but also get a technical and tactical stimulus as well. Because I think that's also important, especially if you're playing 3 games a week, where, or on a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, like you obviously see in the lower leagues. Because if you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, and you're only training on a Monday, Thursday, and Friday, it's likely that you're not getting a significant amount of physical or even technical and tactical load throughout that week if you're not deemed playing in the match play. And I think that often gets overlooked. And where is the development for these players who are deemed not good enough to be getting into the starting 11? Not just not fit enough, but we should also be working them technically and tactically as well from a holistic model.
Yeah.
And I think those sessions the day after a game, which are usually a little bit further away from the next competitive game, can allow for that in order to try to train them a little bit harder and a little bit more load that goes through the bodies.
Yeah.
And that then gives them the best chance of playing in the next game, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Certainly in my career, we've tried many different ways. I've moved away from post-match runs. I just found that at times you don't get enough out of them. Obviously, you're restricted how much you can actually do. It could be 15 minutes. I've seen the groundsman come on with a lawnmower while we're doing stuff. And certainly where we are now, we looked at it and thought, okay, is this actually giving us any benefit? We moved slightly more towards match day +1. Or another way we'll do it here is if we've had a game on a Saturday, the players will all be off on Sunday, and then the match day +2 sort of splits as a session, because we have some that are still recovering, but it'd be with football-based recovery, and then we look at periodising our small-sided games on that day as well. So there's the technical, tactical for the unused players, but it's a difficult thing, because the sort of other side to that is if we're travelling away, they could lose 3 days, because you could have a travel day, you'd have a game the next day and a travel day the next day. So that then leaves us how much is too much, because if those players are now being called on for the game coming up the following weekend, then we have to try and make that decision. So they could be dropping off. I don't think they're ever doing too much. It's such a fine balance between where you place that on a sort of spectrum. Where are you going to put those players, and how are you going to make sure? Now, I think, like I touched on there, they're probably not going to have done too much as they go into a game. But it can be done that, that match day +1 ends up becoming, or +2 even in some cases, could end up becoming too much for that player, because they haven't had exposure. I think certainly when I was playing, you had reserve leagues, which were brilliant. I have a week's training and get in the reserves. And it probably alleviated a lot of the problems we come across. With these I was actually looking at a reserve program from West Ham versus Millwall. I think it was 1990. And it had the likes of Matt Holland, Danny Williamson, Matthew Rush, who got capped by Ireland. Alvin Martin played in it, Tony Gale. And you're looking at that and you're going, that's nearly a first team. Matt Holland went and scored in a World Cup for Ireland. And it's like, this is like, you're looking at going, that's a first team. Danny Williamson went on to Man City. So it's interesting how we don't have that anymore. Like you say, under 23s fixtures are, certainly my experience, because I looked after the under 23s at Exeter as well, are few and far between. They're not regular weekly games. So
no.
Again,
I think they're changing. It has changed quite a lot this year. I've looked at our schedule, and we've got a lot more Sunday fixtures than we've ever had, which is perfect, because you're deemed not to have enough match minutes on the Saturday, play the Sunday, and then you can have your Monday off, sort of thing, say to the players, and then you come in Tuesday and try to have a normal lead into the next competitive game on the Saturday. But you have your chance to shine on as close as you can to the previous fixture.
It's one of those things. Like, I have, do we go? I understand why clubs don't have reserve league now. I understand why that doesn't go, but I still think it was, it was a good thing. But I'm biased because you just wanted to play all the time. One of the things that I've heard you talk about before was sort of the nutritional element to the unused subs. They'll have all that glycogen that's going to need depleting.
So it's likely that they've prepared for the match. Let's talk about it on a Saturday, because it's easier to prepare like that. It's likely that they've prepared for the match on the Saturday and they should. There's no doubt about it. They should prepare as if they're going to come on after 5 minutes and have to play a full 90 minutes, even if they know they're on the bench. So it's likelihood that their muscle glycogen is probably full, and then they're only doing 10, 15 minutes after a game of actually high intensity work. And that is very unlikely to be enough work to actually deplete the muscle glycogen or get anywhere near sort of reducing the stores, because of the such small amount of exercise that it is. And if they're only doing that and then potentially having a day off on a Sunday, probably continue to elevate the muscle glycogen levels on Sunday, and then coming in Monday and performing a training session with still elevated muscle glycogen stores, because they've not done that, but we're trying to train them in order to get adaptation on that Monday. Then the high levels of muscle glycogen stores from a lot of work which James Morton's group's done, who's one of my PhD supervisors, it shows that if they start with high muscle glycogen stores, that their actually adaptations are dampened than if they were with a lower glycogen stores. And that there's probably a threshold within that. For footballers, we don't actually know, because we genuinely don't know a great deal about footballers and their physiology, because no one's allowed us really to stick a needle in them for 30 years. But yeah, so that match day plus one training session could be a brilliant opportunity to have an impact on the glycogen stores, especially reducing the amount of carbohydrates taken during the training session, and then also after the training session as well, in order to try and augment those adaptations that are occurring during that process.
No, it's interesting. I think I gave a presentation for Stat Sports whenever that was, maybe in April. And I was showing how a player that I'd worked with at a previous club and doing an analysis, I think it was Nutritics we used at the time, but actually their consumption was either consistent with every day being a match day -1, or it wasn't enough. So it was consistently low. And that made me think quite a lot about sort of James's work and, nutritional periodization and carbohydrate periodization, which I think is becoming more prominent. But as you're saying, it's difficult when we don't know that much. I mean, we're only ever looking at estimates of what someone's going to be expending and consuming throughout a week. And it's a difficult one, but it certainly makes sense that if they prepared for a game, then that post-match or the match day +1 session, if you're going to go that way, is that's got to be in the back of your mind, because we're never going to get them to a match intensity, but we can replicate certain parts of it.
Yeah, I think Matteo Lancome at Paris Saint-Germain has probably made the best effort so far of what actually constitutes around a 60-minute game, and he used locomotion modeling, I think it was, he used in order to try to estimate what actually do they need to do on a football pitch in training that is going to account for the metabolic demands of a 60-minute match, which was something like 4 minutes of 4v4, 2 7 minutes of 7v7, and some high intensity interval training runs.
Yeah,
which would be intensity wise, the meters per minute wise, I can imagine would be quite high for that training session when it's done at a +1. Myself and James have actually just finished the review. It's in review at the moment, all around carbohydrate periodization and training load, and some of the concluding comments and the future directions that we want to go with that. It's going to cost a little bit of money, so we need to sort of look at the funding. Is with regards to, if players are changing their glycogen content before training sessions, just normal training sessions in the week, what is that having on the adaptations that's occurring for that player? And it's probably that's the next step we've got to go with that side of the nutrition, the carbohydrate periodization, because we're probably at the moment around 5 or 10 years behind cycling, which has obviously seen a dramatic increase in low carbohydrate training and loading for endurance events such as the Tour de France.
Interesting. Yeah, because I remember James saying before that in a sport like cycling, it could be the difference of winning a race. Probably not the same in professional football, but equally as important. You're not fueled for a match day correctly, or if you're not fueling during the week. It's an area I found in previous experience that maybe doesn't get the money spent on it. It's
definitely.
As important as everything else.
For me, the second that I'm sort of in a position at a football club where there's money available to recruit staff, I see a full-time nutritionist as an essential requirement for that role, because if someone's willing to invest in so much in the training with the, let's call it, sports science side of things or the performance side of things, then there should be there's equal amount of stuff put into the nutrition side of things, as well as even sleep, because I think money needs to be spent on sleep for players in order to try to optimize the full aspects of physiology, which is probably eat, sleep, and train.
Yeah, and it's incredibly complex. You're talking about, let's just say 25 to 30 people on a daily basis who all have completely different requirements. They're not the same, despite what some people will tell you. And that's going to change it. And that needs a lot of staff to work with those players. In my experience, and I'm sure the same as yourself, and probably had an excellent experience at Liverpool, but it takes a lot of investment and a lot of expertise.
Yeah.
Then there's the other argument: is it becoming too specialist? Oh, do we have too many specialists around the players? But I think when you're talking the high elite level, we could say Premier League, or I might say Scottish Premier League, but you've got that, and this is the bandwidth is then a lot smaller for what you're trying to get out of those players, which makes it very difficult.
I just think, for me, the staff that are on board now and how it is in football clubs, it's measuring the impact that they're having, and it's so difficult to measure, and it's solely probably subjective, but it's looking at the impact that they're having on different players, and that's where I think where people have come from, especially from the sports science side of things, that people are now so obsessed with injury rates, because that's the only thing that is quantifiable for sports science. Ideally, when we first started off, and it's before my time, before I was born, but I've had this conversation many times in uni. I often sit with Barry just for hours over coffee and reminisce about different times, and I like to find out about why, for example, did Professor Tom Riley want to start learning more about football and physiology in football? And he always tells me because he wanted to optimize performance. I'm like, so why have we come so far away from that then? Because now all we cared about is reducing injuries.
Yeah.
Because that's what's quantifiable and that's what earns you the money. And it's true. It really is true. If you look in football now, and everyone's criticised on how many injuries have you got at the moment, not are your team scoring last minute goals, or how are they working, how are they playing, how are they training, are they training good, are they training hard? Because that's really what we should be getting judged on.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember one of my former uni colleagues, Dr. Craig Boyd, and one thing he said to me that, with footballers, with training, it doesn't always need to be hard, it needs to be good. But you'll always get the ones that just perform at the weekend. And that's a mystery in its own right, because conventional and the way we've possibly gone at the moment, oh my God, their load is not double their match load, they're going to get injured, never had an injury in 42 games. So, and then you've got the other ones who maybe do need more, or and just can't seem to get anything. And that's a performance puzzle. That's things that. But like you say, when we try and quantify things like injury, and we're basing people on. I've seen studies that, and obviously now working on my PhD and looking at leadership styles, and there's a small relationship with injuries, and you look at it and go, yeah, okay then. But that can be misinterpreted. Oh my God, we've got to have a transformational style because that will reduce injuries and the staff are happy. I wish it did work like that, but it actually doesn't, because the multifactorial nature, and I would say most of the injuries that we would see are not as clear cut as the acute chronic or other little things that we've looked at and tried to say, oh, this is what it is. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice there. And going back to, and I remember Tony Strudwick saying quite some time ago that ultimately as sports scientists, our job is to optimize a performance, to make people, if you go to an Olympic sport, that's what's done, when you work with a biologist or, maybe an endurance athlete, that's what, whereas in football and it may not just be football, it may be other sports where we've just tried to find something and we can measure that. So that must be great. Yeah.
Same thing with GPS. It sounds like I'm having a gripe here, but I'm not. It's just I think that's the way the industry's gone. And, we can measure something with GPS. Doesn't mean it's right to necessarily measure it, but we still measure it anyway. Yeah. So we're not going to change that because that's the way the industry's gone. I just think that the industry as a whole and we as a whole need to take more of a broader look and more of an umbrella opinion of it rather than focused on different areas that we've always looked at.
Yeah, and I was having this discussion with our head coach here today, actually, and it's Goodhart's law that, once a measure becomes a target, it's not a measure anymore. And exactly. Actually what GPS is, it's just a measure. So if we get our spaces and sizes and times right, then what we're measuring is likely to be right, because you'll get those fluctuations in training load based on the training. If it becomes a target, it's then easy to say, well, we need 1,000 meters of high speed running, or we need 8K today. Well, you can just get someone to run around the block a couple of times and you'll get that. So it's, what are you measuring and what are you targeting? They're two different things. And I think with GPS, I'm a fan of GPS. It gives me a lot of good information, but sometimes you need to look at, well, you should always look at it contextually, but sometimes it's not about chasing numbers.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer of chasing numbers. I think it's I'd always go for quality, and I think that the numbers is the quantity side of things. Something which the manager I worked out in Hungary for a year with Henningberg, who's obviously played under Sir Alex Ferguson way back in early 2000s. And I used to ask him all the time, what was Sir Alex's training sessions like? And he said, as soon as it started to get sloppy, he used to just say, okay, inside. And it's like, really? And I'm like, but you were the fittest team in the league for like 15 years. And it's like, yeah, he just as soon as it got sloppy and the quality started to go, he used to just send them in. And that was something that Henning took into some of his practice as well, which was brilliant, because it was, for me to see that so early on in my career, it was like, wow, I'm thinking we have to do 6.5 kilometers and 400 meters high speed and 100 meters a sprint distance. It's a Tuesday. Come on, let's get up there. And he's like, no, inside. I'm like, stood there with the laptop or the iPad, and I'm like, no, let's stay out.
And I think the thing about that is, if sessions are planned well, and I'll always use I'll use a small-sided game approach, but you'll know if your wide players are always going to get more. If they're always wide in those games, they're going to get it. And then you can look at, you get a little bit of variation. What we've found is if you tend to get a little bit of homogeneous load if the pitch size and everyone's doing the same with regards to volume. But what you'll find is there's variations in what is actually a player's game.
Yeah.
Your wider players are going to get it. They need it. And I think sometimes that can be, a wide player might need, I don't know, their game might be 1,000 meters high speed running. A centre back, and I'm not picking on centre backs, might be 450. Throughout the week, if everything is planned well enough, they're going to get what they need. Maybe easier said than done, but I think once we start chasing the numbers and going, well, and there has been, I was chatting to Robin Thorpe quite some time ago about, do we need to get people at double their match load across a training week? And Robbie's point was, well, who says that?
That's exactly, mate.
Yeah.
Like, who's come up with this theory that has to be 2 times a week? And
yeah, and I've seen training loads that are probably, I don't know, just over across a week, just over maybe 1.2 of a match load across a week. But there was a lot of intensity and a lot of quality, and the players got through games and reported feeling fine. So there's never really anything that says it has to be this way or it has to be that way. But again, it comes back to measuring things and misinterpreting. And at the end of the day, can a player perform? That's the better question.
That just sprung out to me then about a recent moment for us, and it's obviously with the current pandemic, and we had a player test positive on a Wednesday, I think, or a Wednesday or a Thursday, and he came back in and he trained the day before a game, and the manager asked me, is he ready to play? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I could stand there and lie to you, but I have no idea. I've never experienced this virus before. I don't know what's going through his body. I don't know what's going to be at his body in 60 minutes in a match. And he ended up playing. He played 90 minutes, and he trained one day before a game, and after not training and doing anything outside, no running for 10 days.
Yeah, it's
like
there's so much that you look at, and you've been in your role quite some time now, and you look at things and you're going, that's not conventional. That's not what people would have you believe. And I think it's easy to go down, and I wouldn't say it's a trap, but I think it's easy to go down that alley where it's like, okay, we're just going to measure this, and this is going to almost in some respects predict performance, but actually it doesn't. I've heard various people say that the strongest players they've ever worked with don't really go in the gym, but they get out, and I will always advocate lifting in the gym.
Yeah.
That can happen. There are certain players that genetically gifted and have been around a long time, and they know what's best for them, but they also they look after themselves, and they may have always done things slightly differently. I think any elite athlete is an outlier anyway. You're not dealing.
Yeah, it goes along that
Normality.
nature versus nurture debate, doesn't it? And where that players come from and how they grew up playing football. Just because now they've become a professional, or now they're at a big club, or they're trying to make a career, what should make them change that? Whereas if they're still on that path to try to get to the top, then I think there is different things that they can put in along the way. Whilst we were at Liverpool, we had a player who literally, if we were playing at 5:30 as a kickoff, if we were playing at 3 o'clock, he didn't eat anything before the game. If we're playing at 5:30, he had 2 pieces of toast. That was it. It's like, you just that's defying science. But he goes out there and plays 90 minutes and plays every game.
Yeah. And I think that
where do you stop, and how much impact are we actually having if that can happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
it does make you question the whole profession, really.
We're just out of a job here. But I think you look at you respect the athlete. That's what they've done. That's their routine. They're at that level for a reason. And then it comes into, invisible monitoring, which I've heard you speak about before. And this is a discussion I had with a coach here, and we were talking about wellness and RPE and, wellness questionnaires. Are they that well validated? Do they actually measure what they're telling us? Is subjective? RPE, there's compliance issues. There's loads, are we going to get through an app or a pen or paper? Different discussions that you have. But then it comes down to, is that invasive? Is that really disrupting them to their day and how they, Barry Drust, I think it was 60 odd touch points.
For all the day.
Yeah. And is that necessary? Is it actually giving you what you need to know? I think you need to build on things. You start small, and you can start with RPE and minutes and look at some form of load, and then, GPS if you have that, and then build out from there. I think if you start to put things on top of that are basically not necessary, then, I think you may get a lot of kickback from the players.
Yeah, I think you will, definitely. Something that I've seen, and I've asked I've asked a player a specific question about his wellness one time, and he turned around to me and looked at me with a blank face, and I'm like, what? And I asked him, why are you this? Well, I didn't put that. I said, well, why did you put it on your wellness? He did my wellness for me whilst I was driving to work, and I was like, well, that's not what it's for, really, is it? So how much that actually goes on that I don't know about, and that's probably doing me a disservice there, because the players don't want to do that for me. But it made me question, am I actually making decisions in the manager's office because a player's writing this down at the wellness, when actually someone else has maybe done the wellness for them in the car, or they've done it when they've been in a bad mood after a row with the missus, or they've done it in the car and they've not even looked what they're putting.
I've seen a player and submit an RPE, and you jump and go, that was not 11 out of 10. And on the phone to them, what was it? Sorry, I put it in twice.
Yeah.
Raw data, and you sift through all the raw data, and you're like, it's okay, I could take that out. But those things can happen, and actually, I think, like you say, you could be giving someone wrong information. Wellness questionnaires I think they serve a purpose, and you can see changes, especially around certain phases of the week or even a month, or intense game schedules. You'll see trends. I think it then comes back to, is that normal for that person? Is that person? And that takes a lot of data. It takes a lot of understanding. As I've seen before, the lows are low and the highs are high, and that can be a data. So
there's nothing in between.
Yeah, and I think it's, as practitioners, we sometimes need to look at that and say, is this invasive? Is this too much? Am I asking too much of this player? It's certainly an interesting area, and then probably a whole new discussion and argument. But I mean, firstly, thanks very much for coming on.
No problem, Andy.
Congrats to Crewe last year. I shouldn't say that maybe as an ex-Exeter City man, but you guys I was obviously watching from a distance, but the squad that you had that was very young, and the manager David there and everything, and I think you guys done a an incredible job there last year. So it was good to see. It was, it's brilliant to see you guys get up and going up again into League One, where the demands are probably a little bit.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's definitely more. From what I've noticed so far, I think we played 4 games. Definitely physicality of the league is just a step up. The extra 5-10%, which we've now got to look at. And I think that we told the lads earlier on that they have to give more and they have to put in more. And so be it. We had a better pre-season than what we've ever had in the past 3-4 years since I've been there, and the lads have really responded well to it.
Yeah.
Just
I know.
Keep on getting games cancelled.
I know, speaking to players myself and who have played in, or one of them in every league, and you talk to them about the demands, and they'll tell you, League 2 is physical and tough. League 1 is another step above. The Championship is an even bigger step above. And then when you get to the Premier League, that's just a different level. So respect to the athletes there. And I know we spoke before we came on here about, your time at Liverpool and, the management styles and the players being prepared. And it opens your eyes a little bit because, all the leagues are actually, they're quite contrasting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's throughout the entire football pyramid, and different philosophies work. But I suppose that brings us down to the original point, really, which was what you were saying with the starters, non-starters, and how we work it. Not one club is the same, and getting a League 2 club in on a Sunday is quite difficult because these lads aren't earning millions and millions of pounds a year, and their wives or girlfriends might only have Sunday off because they work in, retail, or boyfriends or husbands, whatever, in today's modern era. But I think that the way that's done and the way it has to be structured, it is so psychological for the players. And if you're going to bring players in on a Sunday, it's not every Sunday. It's sort of 2 Sundays off, 1 Sunday in, and it's the way it's worked around. Maybe when you've got a Tuesday game, you can bring in on a Sunday and train them before the Tuesday game. But I think if you're constantly in and you're not getting any days off, for a League 2 player, it'll be too psychologically demanding, and they're likely just to burn out over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Especially because, I think we've not spoken about this either, but Leagues 1 and 2 don't get international breaks. No. So the staff and players is relentless.
Saturday, Tuesday.
Relentless. And then you say bye to your partner in August, and you say hello to them in April.
Yeah, I'll never forget Grimsby away on a Saturday, and then Crawley away on a Tuesday.
Love it.
The M25 was closed, and we had to come through lanes. Lincoln away on a Tuesday night. Like, you're getting in at 5 a.m. and then your day off is day off because you.
Yeah, we get Colchester. I guess there's just one. We had the Colchester one. We went on the day. We got stuck in traffic for 5 hours. We turned up at the hotel, which we had as a day let, which players were due to sleep and eat. Players literally got there. We got on the bus, went straight to Colchester ground, and got beat 6-0.
Just the thing is, though, I mean, I enjoyed my time at Exeter. I would never have a bad word against the club or the people there. But some of the trips and the travel, it's the first thing you look at. When have we got? This is no disrespect to Grimsby or Carlisle. And says, when have we got them? Colchester to Exeter, and you get past Bristol and you've done 2 hours, and you're like, oh my God, I've got another 5 to go here. Anywhere past Manchester. But actually, my time there, we looked a few times of, do we train and travel? Do we travel and train? And we
different things like that.
Do we train at Colchester because of the hotel down the road? They've got the pitches that you can use, and those things worked well. And they're a learning experience, but they're also things that you need to think of, what's best for these players. Although going back, asking player when we're talking about wellness, sometimes one will prefer to travel and train, and one prefers to train and travel. And you're like,
you can never get it right for everyone. But no, that's I suppose the manager's job to take that decision on the chin.
Okay, mate. Well, listen, it's been brilliant to catch up with you, and thanks for doing this. There's so many good points, and I'm sure we could go on for a long time. But I know you've had quite a hectic day, and I've now got to get my head in the school books.
Nice. Oh, don't envy you, mate. Don't envy you anymore.
So I keep telling people there's only another few years to go.
That's if it lasts 3 years, pal.
I know. Drag on a little bit. Okay, mate. Well, thanks very, very much for that. It's been fantastic. So,
cheers, Andrew. Thank you very much, mate.